time.
Thank you, Lord Chair. Lord Ricketts, if I may start with yourself. In our previous evidence sessions, witnesses have said, very eloquently actually pointed out, that calling something integrated doesn't necessarily make it so. So how can we actually get to the government having a fully consolidated and a holistic approach to our review?
Thank you. I agree, you don't make something integrated by giving it the title. And indeed, there's nothing novel about taking an integrated approach. I would say we did in 2010. We talked about a defence and security review. We wrapped in development cooperation and internal security. We put resilience planning in the heart of it as well. So that was, in a way, an integrated review. And actually, the whole concept of a National Security Council is about integrating, because it's supposed to reach across government and make sure that all the different actors are coordinated and joined up and working together. I mean, what can the review do? Well, I think it can strengthen the incentives for Whitehall to work together. I mean, there are now quite a lot of these pools. There's a conflict pool and a stabilisation pool and so on. In other words, a pot of money that different government departments can draw on in pursuing the same objectives. The risk is they get too bureaucratic, but the idea of joint money to promote joint working across departments is good. As Lord Stirrup says, I think not only the armed forces but the rest of Whitehall has come a long way in joint working over the last 15 years, and I know a little bit about how the intelligence community go about things. The terrorist threat has really forced them to work much more closely together than before. So I don't think there's a problem across government of all these different actors sitting around the National Security Council table working together. The problem is money, usually. In my experience, government departments work well together up to the point where money is involved, and then they dig into their trenches, which is why these joint pools are an incentive for them to work together.
Okay. Lord Stirrup, would you agree with that analysis? And also, do you think that this review should be taking a more of a thematic approach in terms of addressing issues that cut across various government departments?
First of all, I do agree. I think the challenge for defence and for Whitehall more widely is engendering a culture within which this kind of cooperation is sustained over a long period of time. In my experience, and I'm sure Ricketts would agree, during the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, the Foreign Office, DFID, and the Ministry of Defence worked extremely closely together. I mean, trilateral meetings of the ministers on a monthly basis with the officials, really did work very tightly together. But of course, that was under the pressure, an enormous external pressure. What happens when that pressure disappears? What tends to happen is that people sort of revert to bad habits, and the same can be true in defence. So I think that the issue is how you get a sustainable culture rather than how you do things in the short term. I think the crucial issue in terms of security and defence going forward is going to be those processes for working between departments. So, do you routinely consider other departments' needs when you look at your own? Do you routinely have those kinds of meetings at the highest level? Because it does need to be at a high level, because that drives behaviour down through the organisation. And if you have that, then you can address these thematic issues in the way that you describe, which I think is important.
Okay, so in terms of those thematic issues, what themes should the review be addressing, and how should they be structured, do you think?
Well, I think for me there are three key themes that should run through, certainly through a defence and security review. In principle, the first is, as Lord Ricketts already alluded to, is resilience. The first is agility. The second is agility, and the third is adaptability. Mm-hmm. Because inevitably we tend to talk about specifics in these reviews. Do we need this capability or do we need that capability? But equally inevitably, the future, as I suggested earlier, surprises us. So the real question is: do you have a system? Do you have a process? Do you have equipment? Do you have people that can adapt, can think on their feet, and can change in the face of changing circumstances. That, it seems to me, is the thing that we institutionally have been weakest at and need to be strongest at. And you can find no better example in the circumstances in which we find ourselves today.
Lord Ricketts, do you agree with that thematic approach, or would you suggest something different?
No, I certainly agree with that. Indeed, we called our approach in 2010 the adaptable approach. I think if you're looking for more specific themes that the review ought to be concentrating on, I mean, the whole area of cyber, which cuts across all government departments, but which of course is very important in defence, is certainly one. Space is another. The new domain, where Britain has enormous interests at stake and some decisions to take. I think that's important. I mean, I think force projection has got to be an important theme, given that the aircraft carriers and their aircraft are now coming on stream. How are we going to use this capability? For what purpose? How are we going to use the armed forces for influence and effect in the world? I think is quite an important theme as well. And then, of course, there will be many others inherited from the past, including absolutely now resilience planning and the lessons from this absolutely extraordinary upheaval that we're living through at the moment, which has to have consequences, I think, for the way the government plans in the future.
Okay. Well, thank you, Raj.